Jojo, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Michael, for having me.
So, first of all, how did you get into HR in the first place?
Good question, Michael. So I actually spent 10 years in finance prior to joining Kraft Heinz. And then I went to Kraft Heinz in 2015. And I was very lucky to have a mentor throughout my journey at Kraft Heinz, who eventually became my boss, called Melissa Vernack. And Melissa was the one who, in one of our mentoring sessions, said to me, "Jojo, did you ever think about going into HR?" And I said, "No, Melissa, why do you think that?" And she said, "Well, I think you've got a talent for identifying talent." I had done a couple of interviews for her throughout my time at that point at Kraft Heinz. So she was really the one that kind of brought that to my attention. And we didn't have a talent function at the time within the HR function at Kraft Heinz. So she asked me to start the talent function, implement our trainee program, and start all of our talent development, learning and development things at Kraft Heinz. So that's how I ended up. And, I think Kraft Heinz has this very function agnostic approach to careers. So it all started with Melissa seeing that and asking me to go into HR. And more recently, obviously, I'm going to be taking a totally different role in a totally different function, which honestly, it's because of the belief of my current boss. So I think I've been very lucky to have people that believe in me throughout my career at Kraft Heinz. So my current boss is a gentleman called Rafa Oliveira. He will continue to be my boss, but just I will be in a different function.
What does a great workplace culture look like to you?
Yeah. No, thanks for the question, Michael. First and foremost is a culture where people bring their full selves to work. And that's something we talk a lot about at Kraft Heinz. I think as long as people are bringing their full selves to work, they're going to be more productive. They're going to be happier. And ultimately, work is just another means to being happy in life. So, that's my biggest expectation, is that I can make a work environment where people are really truly themselves every day.
That's a great way of looking at it, actually, as well. I think that it's another way of making yourself happy, as opposed to, because there is this idea almost, I think, and has been for a while, obviously, that you have your life where you have fun, and then you have work, which is the bit where you kind of have to do it in order to have fun, but it's not necessarily the best thing to do. Whereas there does seem to be this growing idea that work is somewhere where you do bring your full self, and having that kind of sense of purpose, I suppose, and connecting with what you do is a huge part of that. But it would be much better, I think, if most businesses thought that way, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we don't really have much of a choice nowadays, because with the evolution of digital and means of communication, it's very difficult to split your personal and your professional life. You're constantly talking to your colleagues via WhatsApp. Mm-hmm. We have our own internal kind of Facebook. So I think people need to be a lot more spontaneous nowadays. So it's a lot harder to, I think, hide your true self.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways we don't really have a choice. And in other ways, I think it's only going to benefit businesses, because people will feel more productive if they can truly be themselves.
I think so. Do you have a kind of, so this always-on culture that you're talking about there, this kind of always having your working life sort of bleeds into your personal life and vice versa now. Do you put your phone on airplane mode when you're outside of work? Do you look at emails? Is it all gone? What's, because I have to now put my phone on airplane mode when I'm not in the office. But what do you think is the best way of dealing with that, or is it kind of more holistic than that?
So I don't think I'm as strict as, putting my phone on airplane mode when I don't want to look at my emails. The only time I put my phone on airplane mode is when I go to bed. And probably the strictest time I have in terms of not looking at my phone or trying not to think of work, although I do think it's more holistic than that, is when I'm with my kids. So I've got two little girls, 3 and 6-year-olds, Olympia and Theodora.
Oh,
and
fantastic names.
Yeah, thank you. And when I'm with them, I obviously try very hard not to look at my phone. But I've got many different mechanisms that I use to try to disconnect from work, because I truly believe that trying to release your mind from work makes you better when you're back at work or back at thinking about work. So, I use sport. I just recently started trying to meditate every morning before I start my day.
How do you find it? I gave that a go for a while, but I still try to. But how did you find it? Because it works for some people and not for others.
Yeah. I mean, I just took this course. So I went through a week of a training program that we organize at Kraft Heinz called the Leadership Masters Program. So we were around 18 of us from all over the world. And one of the classes we took was a class with a professor called Professor Hitendra from Columbia Business School. And he talks a lot about reconnecting with your core when you're defaulting into behaviors that you don't want to default to when you're a leader, right? Where you need to, as a leader, you're expected to be many different things all through the day. So he talked a lot about trying to reconnect through meditation, and sometimes it's just taking 3 minutes to breathe in, breathe out, and that's what I'm trying to do in the morning. And actually, I've used this week, at times I've just kind of locked myself in a room or even sat at a chair and just started breathing in and out, for about 2-3 minutes. And it does make you reconnect with, who you truly are and remind yourself that this is just work, calm down and everything's going to be all right.
Absolutely. It does create this extreme calm, really. It's internal calm in a way that I found. Yeah, it does really reconnect you with something. Maybe it is just yourself, but yeah, I've actually found it tremendously useful as well. But anyway, let's talk about diversity, because I know this matters to you a great deal. Do you think there is a direct correlation between greater diversity in businesses at leadership level or wherever that might be and greater business success?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, absolutely. And I know a lot of people debate the measurements of the true correlation between these two. But there are many research out there that talk about, how diversity brings more diversity of thought in business and therefore more creativity, more innovation, more disruption. So I'm a true believer of diversity, and I don't want to talk specifically about any type of diversity, because ultimately for me is having a diverse set of individuals who bring diversity of thought and therefore, disrupt our business, disrupt our thinking, bring more creativity. We are in an industry of, packaged foods, consumer goods. And we are one of the largest FMCGs in the world. And like many of our competitors, we are trying to think about our business in a different way and trying to innovate. So if I don't bring diversity, I don't believe I'm going to innovate. So for me, diversity is a very basic principle of doing business in the future. Yeah.
I agree. I think it seems just fairly straightforward, doesn't it? That if you have more points of view, you will, just by nature of having those points of view, have more ways of thinking about things and ways of approaching work. But so thinking about the individual then, and how I suppose they operate and different people operate in work. What about accountability? I know this is something that you talk about as well. Why do you think accountability is so crucial in the workplace as well?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes, it connects a lot with a lot of businesses are trying to have organic teams and fluid teams, so where people are not necessarily only focused on their role and their function and their task or the task that is given to them. And I think instead of creating structures that are organic, we talk more about ownership and accountability. And the idea behind it is that if you see something in the business that you think you can fix or you think you can help, think of that business as your own. Think that you're accountable ultimately for the entire business. It's as if this was, your business too, as a whole, not just your own function. So, and I think it's benefited us hugely because we haven't had to create these organic teams. Whenever we have somebody that has a good idea and wants to, make that happen, they can. I mean, I just had recently a trainee. She had just started in our business. It was probably a couple weeks into her first role. And she started seeing how we were all utilizing in the office regular coffee cups. So we have a cafe in our main office here in London. And she said, Jojo, we talk a lot about, recycling our own products that we sell in supermarkets. Why are we using these cups and why are we not using reusable cups? And I said, well, that's a great question. Why don't you just go ahead and make it happen? And then a couple of weeks later, she came back and presented in front of 260 people how she sourced, bamboo-made cups, coffee cups that are reusable and that we're all using around the office now. So from our CEO, from our zone president for the international zone to everywhere, down to the trainees, everyone is using reusable cups. So I think that's what accountability and ownership brings.
That's fantastic. That's such a great example of how that can work as well, because usually with accountability you'd think it's you taking care of your own role and kind of like, I know what I have to do and I have to recognize what my responsibilities are. But that's such a great demonstration of how taking accountability for an entire organization can really work as well, because usually it'd be a case of it might get up to a certain point or it might get heard by a certain amount of people. But how do you think that you're able, and Kraft Heinz is able to make that happen, to allow for that to spread throughout the organization in that way?
Yeah. I mean, it starts with us being an example of that, right? I mean, I don't think it starts in any other way. I mean, I always say that culture or any of these values that we claim we live for are things that it needs to start with us as leaders. So as long as we're behaving in that way, people will follow and behave in a similar way. Whenever I'm interviewing or whenever I'm talking to trainees that just came into the business and they ask me about the culture, Jojo, can you tell me about the culture? I always say, I can tell you about the culture and you can read the values on the wall as well. But actually, why don't you just observe how I behave, and that's going to be the culture. Because if you see consistency around how leaders behave, that ultimately is the culture, right? We can talk about the culture reading things on the wall, but I think the best way to live the culture is just to behave in the way we talk about the culture. So.
Exactly. Now that's a fantastic point, and you do see it a great deal in a lot of organizations where it is just whatever values they are written in, acrylic on the wall with some visuals or whatever it is. But speaking about development then, or showing an example to people who may have just come into the business, what about learning in Kraft Heinz? How has that changed, do you think, during your time at Kraft Heinz?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably been the biggest change we've had in the HR community, or what we call the people community, the people and performance area at Kraft Heinz. 4 years ago, we had we obviously had a very basic learning culture, so a lot of in-class sessions, and we then started a digital platform that we called Ownversity, where all of our learning experiences sit. We still hold in-class learning. We truly believe in the human connectivity being a huge part of learning, but also we want to make learning easy and learning available to all. I mean, we all have questions all day, every day. So we don't expect, people to have to necessarily, go somewhere outside of Kraft Heinz to search for answers. So we try to make a lot of the learning available on this digital platform. And I think that was the first and biggest transformation we had. But we didn't achieve what we expected to achieve, which was to create a real culture of learning where people thought, they wanted to learn every day, because our industry is evolving. So I believe everyone should be learning new things every day if we want to be disruptive, if we want to do new things. So very recently, we started what we call a cultural movement of learning, where our chief learning officer, a lady called Pamay, who is fantastic, a brilliant woman, very, very inspirational. She started a movement within Kraft Heinz where she has taken on a challenge of a 365-day learning journey. And every day she takes a new learning and posts on our internal Facebook.
Wow.
That is called the Catch app. And she posts about what she's learned on that day. It can be related to her role, not related to her role, related to our industry or not. But every learning is a learning. And I've actually we call her the first lone nut, and I'm the second lone nut. So I followed her, and I've just taken a 100-day learning challenge. I'm on day 63 now.
Okay.
Of the learning journey, and it's unbelievable. I mean, it's unbelievable how if you take time, and it's beyond just the content, it's the reflection moment, right? We very rarely take time to stop and reflect upon the things we have absorbed during the day. So that learning journey for me has gone beyond just the content I learn every day. I don't pretend to remember every single thing I learn every day, But I think the reflection moment has been very powerful for me. So I love it, and I think.
Can you share some of those? I'm very intrigued to know what some of those learnings might be from day to day.
I mean, I'm currently reading a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book,
think I know,
but the book talks a lot about how to create a growth mindset in leaders. So last night I posted about mindset. So I read another chapter, and I just posted about my learning on the book. And the learning of yesterday was that actually everyone is capable of learning and evolving as long as you put your mind to it and you practice. So the book talks about the endless possibilities to human beings. I mean, nobody should limit themselves because they think they're not intelligent enough or they cannot do certain things. So the book is about believing that learning and practicing is what's going to make you successful.
Fantastic. And what's the response been like when you've shared them from people within Kraft Heinz, whoever else it might be? Like, have people been really engaged, or they've been kind of like, that seems scary to to do that much learning?
This is very timely because just yesterday, so the whole journey started with Pamay, like I said, and then I was what she calls the second lone nut, and we then had the third employee come into the learning journey. She's also taken the 100-day challenge. But we obviously know that not everyone, like you said, people find that sometimes quite scary, or they don't want to commit, or they don't have the time. I mean, I do understand that. So we actually launched yesterday what we're calling the Learn Like an Owner and Make Time for Learning. And they're both hashtags. So we started that campaign yesterday. Our CEO sent out an email to everyone saying he's taking on the challenge too. And we have 3 layers of challenge. I think you can take the bronze, the silver, the gold. And it depending on which level of challenge you take, you have to commit to a certain number of hours of learning. And we had, just last night, I was checking on the Catch app, and I saw about 5 additional employees taking on the challenge. And I mean, the email went out yesterday afternoon. So I think, out
That's
of the
wonderful.
Almost 30,000 employees around the globe, I'm pretty sure we're going to have a campaign and a big cultural change with this.
So amazingly, you've almost sort of preempted my next question, which I was going to ask you about kind of reaching a unified goal as with a leader and a workforce together, how you can do that. But this seems to be a great example of doing that somehow. They've created that connection. But how do you think that's possible in the workplace to kind of reach a unified goal with a leader and their workforce?
It starts, again, I don't want to sound too simplistic, but it starts with defining what the end goal is. So, I went on the Catch app and I said I was going to take that 100-day challenge and what my end goal was. And then I lived by it, and I lived every day by what I had promised. And I think if you set those goals and you keep reminding people of what the end goal is, there will be times of difficulties. There will be a lot of change in between you setting the goal and the goal being achieved. So as long as a leader, you keep reminding people of what that end goal is, and keep people happy throughout the journey every day by inspiring them. I think that's how you achieve great things. I mean, it sounds simple. It's much harder when you actually have to do it. But I think that's how we've been trying to do it at Kraft Heinz.
That's exactly it. I think it's the commitment, right? It's easy to say these things, and every single organisation these days seems to be saying these things, but it's the actual implementing of those very simple ideas almost that's very difficult. So if I was a business leader, somebody who wants to impact a real cultural change in my organisation, but I really have no idea how to do it, or I'm really struggling to do so, what would be your advice to a leader who really wants to make that cultural change happen?
I mean, start by making the cultural change in yourself. If you want people to behave differently, start behaving differently. I take the example of the learning journey we just went as the 18 leaders at Kraft Heinz last week. We have a WhatsApp group now. And I was just talking to the group this morning and telling the group, I feel very different after the week learning journey. And I've been trying to behave differently because of the learnings I had, and I see the benefit. But of course, I need to remind myself every day. So learning, I don't know if you know the forgetting curve, the famous forgetting curve. So you very quickly forget the learnings you've had. And the same goes for what you asked, right? When you commit yourself as a leader to doing something, it's very easy to just get, I think, kind of start, doing or getting distracted with other things in life throughout your day. So you need to have a way to nudge yourself on what that end goal is or what that learning is every single day. I have a very simple thing, which is I write on Post-it notes and I put it next to my computer. Behavior changes I want to see in myself, and those are based on the feedback that I get from my team through the 360 feedback. And every day, just visually, I sit at my desk and I just have those Post-it notes sitting next to me. And the same goes for the learnings I had last week. So I wrote down on a piece of a Post-it, that I want to meditate every day. That's the commitment I've made to myself. So I think visually, I work with visual nudges and visual reminders. So that's my own way of doing it. I think other people will do it in different ways. But try to find a way to nudge yourself. Because, life goes by very, very fast, and it's very easy to get distracted.
Wonderful. I also think it shows an example to other people as well. If people in your team see your computer with these Post-it notes on, they think, oh, my leader's really committed to this, and they're really trying to make themselves change. So I should think about doing that as well. But it's really inspiring. But just before we finish, I understand that you're moving into a new role. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so actually it's just been announced last week that I'm going to be running our Northern Europe business, which is composed of the UK, Ireland, and the Nordics.
Wow.
So
Fantastic.
Very, very excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You excited?
I'm everything. I'm nervous. I'm excited. I'm happy. I'm intrigued. I'm very humbled. I'm inspired by the people we have in the business. There's a really fantastic team in the Nordics business, in the Northern Europe business. So yeah, I'm feeling all these things you feel when you have your first day of school, when you are going into a race if you're a sports person. So yeah, very, 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 very excited and having all of these mixed feelings, but ultimately very committed to make this work.
It's fantastic, and I think it serves as a great example as well to any HR leader or people leader listening that it's that having that role in business and moving forward can happen if you commit to these changes. And I wish you the very best of luck. I'm sure it's going to be. You're not going to need it. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Jojo, for joining us. It's been really, really brilliant, and I think everyone's going to love this podcast. And hopefully, we'll see you again soon.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. I'm sure you found that just as inspiring as I did. Subscribe for a new episode every single week of the HRD Live podcast. We'll see you again soon.